Welcome to Modern Explorer. Today we'll be featuring the famous artist and surrealist gorilla and false prophet Pablo Quiñones.
Hi there, Mateo.
Hey, how you doing, Pablo?
Pretty damn good, man. How are you?
Fantastic. I come in here and it's like I've entered a whole different world.
I know, this is really, this kind of where it all starts for me. Like, if my mind, this is the color of my mind, man. It's green and gold right now.
Tell me, how did this all happen? Like, did this happen since you were a child, or is this something new that's occurred?
This has just started since 2015. Like, the name of, this room, this institution is La Señora. And she has different incarnations. Like, the last place I lived in was La Señora, just La Señora, because that was the first time she existed. But then I moved out of that place, and I moved into this place, and now she is La Señora Dorada, which is like the gilded one.
So it's an evolution
kind of
these of this art. What would you say? What would you call it?
I would call her like a character, like almost like you have the allegory of justice, the allegory of mercy. You know, that lady with the holding scales and the blindfold.
Oh.
So anyways, La Señora is kind of a figure like that, an allegory, but also a literal place. So if justice is a statue of a blindfolded woman holding a set of scales, then La Señora is the picture of a woman like that and this very room, which would be like the courthouse.
So, you have a very unique way of traveling.
When I quit my job and started living in my car was the birth of La Niña. And La Niña is one of the most important characters in my life so far in this. She figures into the famous artist, the surrealist gorilla, the false prophet. She's a central character in all of these narratives. And then in my real life, of course, too. But La Niña, to introduce you, is a 2005 Hyundai Accent. Very modest little car, very reliable.
But she's not anything regular anymore. She's something special now.
She is something special. I gave her a name and a soul. And that she was born in the parking lot of Pikes Peak back when I was early in, when I had moved out of my place and was living in my car. I would sleep a lot in the parking lot of that Pikes Peak. And it was on one of these nights that I started sketching with Expo marker, just little things on the roof. And I had for a while the idea of doing this mural on the inside, so she would be like my Sistine Chapel. But that was really hard because it's awkward to draw in such small spaces. It's awkward to position your body to be able to draw in such small spaces. And so that wasn't making too much progress. But then when I started drawing on the roof, I'm like, this is so much easier. And that was really the birth of all the murals that are on her now. And the beginning of it anyway. The real seminal moment in the panel that now adorns her right side is one terrible. It was a few months into this living in my car thing, and it was November. I was staying part-time with my brother because it was so damn cold. I could never be warm. I would get 3 hours of sleep a night just because from 1 to 3 a.m. it's just unbearably cold. There's nothing I could do to stay warm.
And normally around that time, the calories that you ate that day are depleted.
Oh yeah, and I wasn't eating very much then either. It was a lot of coffee and Clif Bars. So I wasn't getting very much sleep, and life was just generally miserable. But I was hanging out with my brother this one night, and I took a selfie. It was me kind of looking down and pensive. And I drew this self-portrait on the side of La Niña, and that was, when I was done with it, it was like looking at an earthquake. It totally redefined what was possible for this car. And that portrait necessitated a whole other series of portraits, which became the Drama Quiñones, which was a series of portraits of my grandparents, my parents, my siblings, and poetry and song, written in calligraphy in between, which became my first work that I would consider epic. in scope and in execution. Like I finished that. I drew it in Colorado, in Texas, and in Florida.
So would you say that that first portrait was almost like an epiphany, a waking up of a potentiality and expanding the limits of what you thought weren't possible beforehand?
Yeah. Because before it was just little sketches and odd notes of things I wanted to remember, like nothing I would want to show to other people.
So this made you realize how you could expand, and how even like something that like a vehicle could be turned into something that's so much more.
Yeah.
And also at the same time a part of your life.
That part came later, but it was around that time that I made the connection in my mind that like Columbus's ships were the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. I didn't name her after that ship, but it is a funny coincidence, and
No, that's very intriguing. Going to a new world.
Exactly, and it was a world inside of myself, but also literally in that I traveled to all these places.
So now that you're on this epic quest, I mean, I think it's safe to say you're a modern day Renaissance man. Where do you want this world that you've created to go? What is what's on the horizon? What's next?
So one thing I thought about lately is that everything good in my life started off as a joke. Like the famous artist Pablo Quiñones, Realist Guerrilla, False Pablo Quiñones. All of it is not serious, and yet it's gaining such momentum that these fictional infrastructures of like the Sovereign Party Quiñones, which is the political organization that supports the Surrealist Guerrilla Pablo Quiñones, is becoming an actual thing. Like the people who wear the T-shirts, they're my surrealist cadre here in Colorado Springs to help bring about this surrealist revolution, which is a fictional thing, and yet it's acquiring a momentum in reality in these T-shirts, in this writing group, in this room. Like there is an actual physical infrastructure that started off as a joke.
It's evolved to create a life of its own.
Yeah, like this really exists, and maybe it's not like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, but there are people coming around to this cause, loosely united by, I guess, me and this kind of fun narrative I have.
The defining medium that connects everyone together.
Yeah, and it's still not serious, but like these things, they started off as a joke. They started off as little stories I would tell at the Cafe Bohemia, and little posts on Facebook, and now, maybe in 10 years it'll be a quasi-fictional political party with chapters all over town, all over the states. But I like to put my life into periods, almost like
chapters.
No, like periods in the way like Picasso had his blue period and then his road period,
okay.
and so like that period from like being a teenager till about like my early 20s, and that experience with Gustavo, like I call that the grace period. And this rose here is like a symbol of that time. But and I call it that because like there was no particular plan. Like I'd gone off the military track, and that had been sort of the organizational infrastructure of my life up to that point. So like I really had nothing to replace it with, only kind of this vague desire to be what I was, and I didn't know what that was because I spent my whole childhood trying to, like a lot of people, please their parents. So I had nothing to replace it with, so I was just doing little jobs, being a cashier at Home Depot, being a cashier here and there, and moving, and just little jobs while I figured myself out. But there were times where it was truly miserable. Like when I was living in my car after I had quit with Gustavo. Like, granted, it was voluntary, and I wasn't helpless about it, but I just wasn't willing to go back and be somebody who I wasn't, or to be subservient to another man. Like, I wanted to do my own thing, and yet at that point I lacked the balls to be able to actually do that. So I was just languishing. And so actually there was this time in Florida where I was in the Publix parking lot thinking, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm a 26-year-old man living in my car. Shouldn't I be doing something with my life? And I was still struggling with being off the previous track of military career and more professional, respectable sort of life. But I had a moment of conversion in that time where I interpreted it from my own lens, not from the lens of my father or from what I perceived to be society's interpretation. I cast my own story, and my story was that I am literally living in a work of art in the form of La Nina. I'm writing poetry like I never have before, and the reason I'm in the state of Florida is to study Salvador Dali. I mean, this is pure, this is beautiful, this is true, and I have nothing to be ashamed of, and haven't been ashamed ever since, really.
Well, thank you for joining us on Modern Explorer, and thank you, famous artist, Surrealist Gorilla, and of course, False Prophet. Join us next time. But is there anything you'd like to say?
I was once a poor man, and now I have all of this.
Thank you for joining us. Till next time.